Hey, I think we are good to go. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on your time zone. Today, we are together with Chris Wagner, who is one of the MVPs and the creator of Data Gods. It's good to see you with us, Chris. Without further ado, I'm handing over to you. Today's subject is very exciting, and people are quite keen to learn from you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Hale. It is so wonderful to be meeting with you and meeting with everyone today. Today is my birthday, and I get to meet with you and talk about my two absolute favorite topics in the world, and that is SQL and Power BI, and how as a Power BI developer, SQL is the _1 language you should be going out there to learn. I can't wait to go into this. So let's not dilly dally. Let's get talking. All right, I'm gonna share my desktop. Presume you can see it.
Yes, we do.
All right.
I think it is not Greg. Thank you.
What's
I
that?
received a call that my
Sorry, I'm answering
had been
Greg.
hit.
Oh, did the sound not come through?
Yeah, that's fine. We are good to go, Chris.
Oh, we're good? Okay. All right. Okay, good. Oh, Greg just make a joke. Okay, cool. All right, so we are talking about SQL for the Power BI developer, and to do so, we're going to be using The Office as a theme and a background for all of this conversation. So, as a Power BI developer, why the heck, should you give a crap about SQL? Right? You work in Power BI. You've taken on the task of learning DEX. You have the burden of working with M. Why should you suffer under SQL, right? And yes, those are all alliterisms that I came with on the spot. But let me get right into why this is super important for you, okay? Frankly, SQL is older than I am. It was actually created in the year that I was born. It was just a few months before I was born. SQL came into existence, but it is the standard language that data speaks. So regardless of the language that you work in, or what platform you're on, SQL is one of the foundational tools that you'll be able to use, broadly speaking, no matter where you go. Okay. It is very easy to engage and work with. So we're going to have a little bit of participation in this, because at the end of this, I want every single person that's on this call to be able to write fully functioning SQL. And I know that may sound like a grandiose claim, but we are going to get you there, because every time we get through, or when we talk about SQL, all we're talking about is three basic statements you need to understand: select, from, and where. Okay, so we're going to be repeating that, and every time this comes up, when we see select on the screen, I want everyone, wherever you're at, to say select. Okay, and so it's going to be a group participation thing, and so Hale, I'm going to ask you to help me with this one, because we're going to be doing this together, okay? Because this is a super powerful language, and I want you to walk away knowing this, okay? Now, the great news is that while SQL has been previously something that was hard for people to get at, because now we have Power BI data marts, this is something that's free for analysts and people in the business to start to access and use. As long as you have Power BI Premium, you can start to spin up data marts, and you can start to leverage this so that you can run a SQL statement against a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets. That's something that has been never really possible before, right? Unless you had a SQL server and you had all the tools and capabilities to import data out of Excel spreadsheets into the SQL server, and then be able to run queries against it, you just couldn't do it. But now it's totally free. So you have access to all sorts of new capabilities when it comes to looking at and analyzing data that is at your fingertips. Okay, now here we go. We're going to do this. We're always select. Come on, select from where, right? Select from where. Yes, Greg, come on. Select from where.
Where?
There we are. Select from where. All right. Good. We'll do this again in a bit. So you guys have it though. I like this. I love the energy. That's great. All right. Why do you care about me? Like this guy who's making you talk on a Teams call. I know that's bogus, right? My name's Chris Wagner. I'm an analytics architect at Rockwell Automation. I provide broad scale support for our company. So we've got 1,400 Power BI developers. We've got 30,000 Power BI users. We've got all sorts of enterprise clients and enterprise teams that are out. We've got, I think it's 300 enterprise team members creating content for people with a Focus 50 building out large enterprise models that are being consumed broadly across the space. I'm the founder of Kratos BI, the home of the data god. So please head out to my website, check out that information. I got a ton of great useful tools and tricks because frankly, I've got a whole like arsenal of tricks that I use to do my job better. Apparently I was just showing this to Anthony earlier and he said I should put this out on the site too. This is my PowerPoint where I keep all of the icons for various Office and Azure and everything Power BI, so that if I need to create a PowerPoint, it's really easy for me. I got a whole bunch of tools that are out there like that. I'll make that available as well. So do check out the website. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP because I just absolutely love this stuff and have had a great deal of success working with it. I am the Analytics Rebel. That was an award I got. Fairly proud of that one. And also a Future Edge Award winner. So I've been working this stuff for a long time. Done quite a bit of stuff. I think that is a good baseline. You can follow me on both YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I do try to have the funnest YouTube or Power BI YouTube channel that is out there. I mean, not the funnest YouTube channel. That's got to be someone else. But I think I definitively have unlocked the funnest Power BI channel. And I look to continue to bring more and more information, enjoyment and entertainment with you for there. As such, I have managed multiple 30,000 installs of Power BI at enterprises. I've been working with large groups of people inside these areas and inside these teams. And frankly, after all this experience and working with all these people, the number one skill I see missing with people working with any of these tools is the ability to write a SQL statement. A SQL statement can help you get through some real challenging validation issues, resolve troubleshooting problems, just all sorts of issues can get resolved with SQL Server or with a SQL statement. And it's the number one thing. If people knew how to do this, well, frankly, they wouldn't have to come to me to get help because they'd be able to help themselves. And all I want to do is help people help themselves. All right, let's keep going. But if you're going to get started working with SQL, there's some things you need to be aware of and to be mindful of when you begin to work with this. So at the outset, we're talking about the first thing you're concerned with is what server are you going to connect to? Okay, so there's always a server that's running, the DBMS or database management system that you'd be running your SQL against. So that could be a SQL server, it could be Snowflake, it could be Redshift, it could be Teradata, Netezza, whatever the case may be. there's always going to be a server. On that server, there's always the database that you're connecting to. And then from within the database, there's all sorts of objects inside of the database that's going to help you access and consume information. The most basic items that we're going to be talking about are tables, where the data is stored, right? So think of like an Excel spreadsheet, a table, right? So it's just, that's all that it is. A schema that helps you organize the tables into different groupings and clusters. And then views, which are, they look exactly like tables to most people, but they create a layer of oh my gosh. They create a layer between the actual table where the data is stored and where you as a user would come in and consume that information. There's some reasons why you might want to have a view in between there, but basically you could think of a table and a view as virtually the same thing at a very basic primitive level. But that's all you need to know of. So if you have access to a view and you don't have access to a table, that's okay. Sometimes you'll have access to tables, sometimes you'll have access to views, sometimes you'll have access to both. All right. Now, basic syntax are your select statement. We've kind of started going through this once. The select is going to give you what it is you want to get. What are the fields? What are the attributes you want to retrieve from the database for your query, for the data that you're looking at? From is going to be what tables are you going to, or table or tables are you going to get that information from? And then where, you're going to be looking for some limiting factors to winnow down the information that you're trying to pull up. All right. And so when you write your query, it's going to be select field from table where this field equals active or something along those lines. Okay. But when you write your queries, I want you to do something slightly different. While this is the order that the fields come in when you write them, I want you to think about them in the from, where, and select. Okay, so think about what tables are you going to pull information from? What limiting factors are you going to have on your queries? And then decide what are the items that you're going to get into. Okay, so that's just a pro tip to help ensure that the information you're pulling is going to perform as best as possible. And you'll have your DBAs as unangry as they can be. Here we are. We're back at it. Everybody off mute. Select.
Select.
Come on. Select.
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 From.
From.
Where?
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 Hey, who jumped? Somebody jumped.
Select.
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 From.
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 Where?
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 All right. Good job. Good job. All right. Let's head over to my laptop and let's run through just some of these basics so we can get familiar with it. Oh my gosh. Where did my... There we go. All right. So here is my, in this case, I'm connecting to SQL Server Management Studio. And we'll close this off so we, nope. And I've gone and I can go ahead and I can connect to a database engine. And actually, let me zoom in so you can see this a little better. So up here, God bless it all. We can go to connect. And if I select database engine, it'll prompt me with what server name and how I'm going to authenticate. So in this case, I'm going to connect to my local host because I have a SQL server running on my local host. I'm going to go ahead and click on connect. For my local host, for this server, I'm using Windows authentication. This is my, basically my workstation ID. So click on connect. I go out and I have access to my databases. So underneath my databases, I can go in and I can see that I've got two that I have access to, AdventureWorks and Dunder Mifflin. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to be using the Dunder Mifflin database. So I'm going to expand the Dunder Mifflin database, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at my tables. And as I can see inside of here, I've got several tables that are available under my Dunder Mifflin database, right? Dunder Mifflin tables, and I've got categories, customers, employees, and then right here you could see the schema name. Someone mute. There we go. You can see the schema name is DBO. Okay, it's important to remember that because the DBO is going to be part of the query that we're going to be writing. Just a second here. All right, so I want to write a query against this database. So what I can do is I can right-click on a database. I can click on new query, which is right underneath it, right? Right-click. Come on, new query. All right, so I've got a blank query that opens up right here. And I can run a query that I've created to pull back all of the fields in my employee table, right? So I've got my select, I've got my from, and in this case, I don't necessarily need a where because I don't know what I'd want to limit this by. So I'm going to do another thing when it comes to limiting a table because I always want to put some sort of limit on a table because I don't know how much data could be in this employee table, right? If I've never been in it before, I just don't know. Maybe there's a few hundred records. Maybe there's a terabyte of data behind this, and that executing this query could take 5,000 hours. So I'm going to say top 1,000. Is that right? Yep. And as you can see, if I zoom in down here, there's only 55 records on it, so it's no big deal. This limit is no problem. Now, you may find that in the different databases that are out there, there are different controls that are in place that can where this goes. In SQL Server, it's the top 1,000, but in other databases, you have to do limit 1,000 or something else at the end. SQL, there are a bunch of different flavors of SQL. So every once in a while you have to find some little slight differences, but for the most part, it's a very structured language. It's fortunately very easy to use. Okay. Now this looks good. This is an employee table. I like this. But I've noticed one thing inside of here is that it's got last name, first name, middle name, which at a database level, that makes sense. That'd be how you'd want to store that information. But inside of my reporting space, I don't want that. I don't ever care to separate these names out. I want to have the names all together in a nice business-friendly name. Well, I can go over to my next query that I've got here. And so I can easily go in and I can modify my query to add in, I can do a plus, I can do a single quote, comma, space, single quote, plus employee first name as emp name. Well, anyone care to take a guess as to what this little basics statement does? That's right. It creates a first name for people. So I'm going to hit F5 and take a look at that. I've got this really nice formatted, name that I can use inside my reporting. So I've got it by the last name. I put a comma and a space in there. Just one space. And then I've got the employee first name. And in fact, I dropped off the middle name because, you know what? I didn't have any need for that, right? Does that make good sense? All right. So those are some examples of some basic things that you could do with select from where. Let's go back to the presentation. And let's keep this going. All right. Now, next thing you can do inside of a SQL statement is you could throw on some very common aggregations, okay? You may think, hey, Power BI does my aggregations, and you're 100% spot on. Power BI can and should do the vast majority of your aggregations. You don't necessarily want to push those back, but there are times and places where it might make sense, especially if you're doing some validations on the information that you're looking for, that type of thing. And aggregation side of a SQL Server is really important, okay? When you're doing an aggregation, though, there's some things that you need to take into mind, right? So you're going to need to create, what are you going to summarize, right? So you're going to have to define the things that you're going to summarize. And then you're going to have to define what are you going to aggregate, what are you going to group by, right? And then what order you want to see that information in, okay? Now, the next thing that is really big is, and this is where it becomes really transformative, is the ability to join different tables together using different join methods. Now, while there are a lot of different ones that are out there, the basics of your joins are almost all of them are going to be inner joins. The next most common type are going to be your left joins, or your left or right joins. A fringe type for the basic users would be an outer join, where it's everything here and everything there, where nothing, no conditions match. Now, I would say you probably get between these two, your inner and your left joins, you'll probably talk about 99% of your joins that and queries that you have to write. This will account for that 0.5% of the other joins that you'll ever need. And then all of the other joins that exist in the universe, which there are quite a number of them, will fill up that other fractional percent. So if you're just a Power BI developer and you walk away just knowing these two, an inner and a left or right join, you would be wise to say, okay, if I'm going to only learn two things when it comes to joins, it would be the inner and the left or right. Okay, so we want to keep this as easy as we can. All right, yeah, because Kevin likes it easy. All right, here we go again. Select. Come on, everybody. Select.
Select.
Select. From.
From.
Where.
Where.
All right, good deal. All right, so let's head on over and let's go back to the demo and let's keep this going. What? All right, so this is you say, hey Chris, I don't have Management Studio. This is all well and good, but I thought you said you could do this in data marts, and actually you can do this in data marts. And in fact, what I have up here is I've connected to the Power BI data marts. And the exact same tables that I have down below, right? I've got in my Dunder Mifflin database here, I've got categories, customers, employee regions, employee status. Well, lo and behold, out on the Power BI service, I have created a Power BI data mart that has the exact same items on it. So what I was doing, what I was doing down in SQL Server, I can do up inside of my Power BI data mart. Now you say, hey, Chris, but that's, it doesn't look quite the same because my schema down below is DBO, but my schema up in Power BI data marts is model. You're spot on. So all I have to do to make this work is change from DBO to model. Hit F5. Oh, come on. Oh, I got to change what I'm connected to. Oh, Oops, I need to actually do this. New query. Copy this, go over. Same query that ran before, runs, producing the same results. And in fact, I'll reset that to the same value, hit F5. And if we look, I get the same results in both places. Now, one thing I didn't mention before, which I should have, is I'm using what's called an alias. So instead of saying model.employees everywhere in order to identify a field or fields, because I could say like model.employees.employee ID and model.employees.last name, right? I could do that. Instead of creating an alias, this EMP here, so I can now say, instead of having to write out the schema and the table name, I can just use EMP everywhere inside my queries as a form of shorthand. Now, this alias can be anything. So you'll find people that will use like A, B, C, and D when it comes to their naming or aliasing tables in a query. Please, for the love of all that is holy in this world, do not do that. You will find that you will really, really regret that if you do. I'm not the one who's going to come out and punish you. I would like to think the data gods would, but we're not really that kind of gods. It's more of a marketing gimmick. No one should pray to us type of thing. Please make sure that you, if you're using aliases, that you go in and you do so in a reasonable fashion. Okay. Now, I've taken that basic query that we've done, and I've added in an inner join like we were talking about. Okay. So I wanted to join in the employee status table, right? So here's my my model employee name or my employees table. I'm going to join in my employee status table, right? And I'm going to do so by joining my employee status ID in my employee table to the status ID in my employee status table. Now, a big thing that I want to do anytime I do a join is I want to make sure that I've validated the join is returning the results I'm going to expect, right? In this case, my employee table has 55 records in. We've known that. We've tested that out. I want to make sure that any join I add in has that same 55 records. So I'm going to use a sneaky thing here called, it's called a comment. But I'm going to do a comment with select count parenthesis star parentheses. What that does is that allows me to do a selective execution. So I can highlight a table, or I can highlight these values so I can include my join. I can include my where if I had one, and I can hit execute, and I can validate that I am getting 55 records back. All right. This becomes really important as you add in more joins on tables that you might not be familiar with, especially if you accidentally break the cardinality levels. And let's say instead of 55 records getting back, I had 60 records. What would that mean? That would mean I've duplicated some of the records because there was more than one match. My employee table had more than one match in the employee status table or whatever other table I was joining to. Okay. So it's a real good practice to have this select count on any time you're creating a query so that you can always go back and say, hey, yeah, I have done that. I wrote this join right, and I'm getting the number of records I'd expect back right. Now, the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to include the status name from that new employee table or MStat table. So at the end of my my query, I added in a new field for emp stat from the table emp stat is to include the status name. I also, at the exact same time, removed the employee status ID from the original query. The reason I did that by commenting it out is because if I have the name, because I want the name in my results, I don't necessarily need to have the ID anymore, right? Like what the ID doesn't add any business value to me. It's just used for the join, so I don't need to have that, right? So I just comment it out. I leave it in, even though it's commented out, just in case I need to troubleshoot or something along those lines. But I then add that in and leave that in place. All right. We're going to keep going because I got quite a bit. Next thing I want to do, though, is because we want to start doing some aggregations on this, is I want to start doing some validations to make sure I understand how much data is available or inside of other tables that I have available to me. So I'm going to start looking at the orders table and the orders detail table. Okay. So that's the next query that's going to be most important to me. So I've got a new query that I'm going to write on this, and it's got my select sub. Wait a minute. Didn't I say something about data marts? And I'm connected to a data mart here, and I've got my query here. But Chris, can't you do the same thing inside of the Power BI service? Greg said to me, and I said, yes, Greg. That's interesting. Yes, Greg. Yes, I can. Uh-oh. Let me go over. So here I am in my Dunder Mifflin data sets. Where did my data marts go? There it is. If you go into, let me take it back. If you go into your content, you will see that your data mart appears as this little data mart. Looks almost like a, kind of looks like a storefront, doesn't it? Doesn't it look like a shop? That you can then go in and start to do these same types of queries out in the service. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this is, now you'll notice on the left-hand side, I've got the same tables that I had before. Okay. Now, what's super cool is the same queries that I had before, you can now store inside of your data mart and make it really easy to come back to and run again. So here is the query that I was going to run inside of Management Studio. I can just do that exact same thing inside of my data mart. So I just click on run. It runs and gets me the information. So I've written a query that joins my data together, right? As I go from orders to orders detail, connected by the order ID. And in this case, I'm just summarizing the quantity and the total, the line total of the different orders that are in my system. All right. Now, I want to go in and do the next thing. I want to do some like actual validation of the information that I'm seeing. I can go in and I could start to write a more complex validation. So for example, I want to look by employee ID, employee name, and employee address and break it out by each one of these so I can actually track what's my employee performance like. I can do that by slightly modifying the previous query to include the employee information. And then look, I put a left join on the regions, and let's see why. Oh, actually, I don't have it in this one. It doesn't matter. So now I can go in and I can see Stanley Hudson, and I can see Michael Scott, and I can see Phyllis, and I can see Dwight. I can see the amount of their sales and their totals. And now I can start to do some validations. You say, Chris, why is that important? That's a great question. Well, I've got all of this data available for me in Power BI. I can go in and I can say, yep, I have my my quantity. I've got my line total in right here. I can go through and I can validate Dwight Schrute's 100,000, Dwight Schrute 101. Oh man, that's not right. Maybe I have to do a refresh, but whatever. Oh, that's funny. Why isn't that? Well, so I can start to go through and I can validate and tie these things out to figure out why I might have discrepancies with data and any issues. But we're going to start with the premise that this is basically right. And then we're going to drill into, so we've got Dwight Schrute, but then we're going to start to drill into the suppliers and see who's supplying Dwight's information. Oh, and now we start to run into a challenge. Because while Dwight's information is basically right, as I look at the suppliers, I can see that we've got an issue. All of my suppliers have the same number of orders, same quantities, same, well, actually, this one's fine. Well, same number of orders, same quantity, but then these other ones are, oh no, it's just number of orders. Did I fix this? Ah, crap, I fixed it. Well, that's supposed to all be identical. So, and then the issue, if you go into look into this, how did that? That's so. The issue comes into is how you've defined where your suppliers are. How did that even possibly happen? That's weird. How did you get to your suppliers inside your model? Because this is the model that the Dunder Mifflin database naturally produces. Okay, so you're going to naturally find some challenges like these order numbers repeating. Now, frankly, these others should repeat too, but that's the part that's broke. The issue here comes down to where my suppliers are in relation to where my orders details are and the employees and how that ends up getting broken out. Okay, because this is in an operational model and it's not a star schema, that's why I'm starting to see, that's why I have some discrepancies. So writing queries allows me to go in and create what that baseline validation should be. So not only can I do it by the employees, but I can actually go in and I can set that up for the different suppliers as well as the employees by supplier. So I can go in and see what these values should be. By breaking these out, by writing the query appropriately, I can go in and track and understand what these values should be for each one. Something that is very difficult to tell if you have an issue inside of your Power BI just by natively looking at it. All right. Okay, back to the presentation. All right, and this is where we start to get into. In order to do that validation, you need to make sure you're doing your group buys and your order buys, so you keep things relevant and you keep things in an order that makes it easy for you to go through and line by line do a comparison, do your lookups and checks. Okay. Now, this also leads you to the point where you can start to do, oh my, where you can start to do some additional modeling inside your tables so that you can, where we had a model that was not necessarily set for a star schema, we could start to get to a more true fact and dimensional model. That makes it easier to create and manage type 1 and 2 type joins. That's a different thing, but it just becomes easier for you to go in, use, and leverage the information in a repeatable fashion. Because modeling can be very hard, especially if you're just using Power Query to model and structure your data, especially if you don't necessarily know what you're validating that data against. SQL can help you make sure that you have the appropriate validations available. All right. Oh, and this is where we got into this. So this is the app data that I was showing you. So you can go in and actually see it. Oh, what happened there? There we go. Okay. Yes. So you see the duplication. Uh-oh, there's an issue with there. We've got to sort this out because we cannot have this be in place, right? Because we need to get to the point where we can go in and see that, where the breakouts are inside of each of these models. Now, I'm going to show you how we did that in the next, or how we use queries for that. Where did my, here we go. And that actually is our last item. And this query allows me to create a centralized fact table where I can actually get to a star schema, where I've got all of my dimensions, right, floating around my fact table, and I can ensure that everything is going to tie out and produce the right results. And because this is available in SQL, you're able to actually write this, connect to the SQL data mart, and execute this query itself, and bring this into your model. Now, we're going to see how this goes, because in this either runs in 3 seconds or 3 hours. Remember, Power BI data marts are in not in GA. They're just getting out. So sometimes the performance is a bit iffy. Today is we're looking fairly good. We got results coming back. There we go. So, not 3 seconds, but 20 seconds isn't bad. I've now rebuilt a fact table that is a star schema where I've got all of my IDs available inside of my fact table. I've got my joins in place where I can actually, even in this one, I actually added in, I'm limiting my fact dimension to items that have shipped within 14 days of being ordered, okay? Something that can be very difficult to do. This type of logic can be very hard to add into a dynamic query inside of a Power Query. Very easy to add this type of logic inside of a SQL statement. This also means that I'm able to create this data model that I have here and start to build out more robust queries and reports so that, it becomes easier for, my consumers and my users to be able to go in and interact with the reports. And I have that true line of sight into everything that I'm looking at when it comes to the information I'm consuming. Okay. Now, the last thing that I really like about this, because I can now write complex queries that I can now query and validate, is I can actually now create a data quality check dashboard, right? By publishing this Dunder Mifflin model that is now my official model that I have, right? So, come on now. This can become my Dunder Mifflin data set that I can certify, and I can build my reports off of this. I can then take that data set and I can use these validation queries and a composite model to build out a validation Power BI report and actually validate all of my dimensions that may come from different sources, may come from different places against that central data set, okay? So in this case, I've kind of simulated what it's often like, because in my demo, I'm just pulling it from one database, but the reality is most of the time this information comes from many, many different places, right? So your date dimension may come from your enterprise data warehouse, but your your product dimension comes from your ERP, and your employee information comes from your HR system, and sales information comes from your CRM, system, right? So you can actually then build a report that you then sit on top of your data set that monitors the information that's in your data set, but by adding in a composite model so that you can add in a query, right? So in this case, I've added in a query on this, right? Where I say, yes, I want to run this. I can actually pull back that information that is that I'm pulling in. Yes, this is the right information. I can then add that into my model so I can actually see where I've got my my fact reseller. So in a bit, right? So I can actually see that I've got my fact is joined to all of my various dimensions, and my validation query or queries is joined to my various dimensions. And then I can test and monitor this broadly inside there. And by creating little notes around what you do to fix it, as well as like links or like tips and like, okay, hey, this is especially like things like your HR system. If it's a remote system that you're pulling this stuff into, provide the links, provide the notes on how to fix it for that person that comes along behind you. But once I get this up and running inside the service, I can then stick a metrics on this. I can pin these into a Power BI metrics. Now, right? So I can go into my reports, and I can create a quality metrics scorecard that tracks the progress or the quality of the data that I have in my system. And then allows me to actually communicate back and forth between my other engineers or users that are consuming information saying, hey, man, this stuff isn't right. Hey, Luchador, we have an issue. What the heck, Power BI, Luchador, get in there and fix this, right? I can actually comment and have a communication back and forth with my consumers and my engineers about this being an issue. Then I can include that scorecard inside of my Power BI reports as a quality tab so that people can go in and just track and understand when and where that we have issues, and then see if there's comments around it. Like, oh, hey, this fiscal year thing is off. It's got a value here. Now, I've purposely made this bad so it looks, you can see there's lots of issues. But you can actually see that there's a commentary going back and forth with people and that people are working on it. You can also then use another one to actually go in and say, hey, new check-in. Yeah, I want to include a note. Hey, RBI Luchador, there is an issue with this one too. Right, and now I can hit save. I've communicated that back in, and I've never had to leave Power BI. I never had to like go into a queuing system or anything of that nature. Right? I'll go away now. Oh, that's weird. No, I never had to leave this experience. Oh, there you are. I never had to leave my reporting experience to understand the quality of the data, and that the data that my analysts and engineers are bringing in and presenting to me. All right. Now, I got 5 minutes left, 7 minutes before the end of the hour. What questions you guys have for me about any of this?
Okay, please do not hesitate to write your questions into chat window or just simply unmute yourself and ask directly. Come on, guys.
Did I speak too quickly for The language barriers or gaps.
So hi, Chris. So I have a quick question about like the SQL for Power BI.
Sure.
So yeah, so for our team is a very small team, only have 2 or 3 people. So everyone comes from the business background. Then some of them come from that. So the manager doesn't want us to use the SQL very heavy. But since we use the data flow, so we start to use the SQL, get this kind of the query folder stuff we're working on, then get easy the refresh doesn't take that much time. So since you talk about all this kind of the SQL stuff, so how do you think how heavy like a kind of the BI team should use it? Not also we can do something, but it's not very heavy because that kind of skill set is very hard to train up very fast. So what kind of how deep we should go for that?
Great question. I always caution people on adopting new technology just because it's new. You need to have an actual business reason to adopt it. And when you do choose what you're going to adopt, evaluating the technology based upon the user base, how easy it is to train people up, and get people engaged in that is really important. Like I could think of a number of pieces of tech that I've looked at over the years that, like, while very powerful, like the bar to enter and the number of languages and skills you had to learn to participate was super high. When it comes to TSQL or SQL, and the reason why I recommend it is because it's 48 years old. It's been around forever. The basics of it are select from where. Keeping things as simple as possible is important, but yeah. But you know, the more you can do it on that side to not go too deep into the SQL, it can kind of help those business users along. But then also help, you know, as you start to do stuff with SQL, run through that and explain and help lift them up when it comes to training and understanding of what you're doing with SQL. Okay, because they need to kind of come along with you, and it's not, while it may seem scary to them, this is something that they 100% are capable of doing, as long as you do like how I was showing you how I wrote this out. And one thing I didn't cover is my use of white space here, right? Do you see how this is all laid out? Very easy to read. You could see field by field. It's very easy, right? In fact, this is only on one line because I'm combining things together. Otherwise, keep everything on one line or on separate lines so it's each piece is easy to read. The more you can do that for a business user, the easier it will be for them to adopt this and get up and running with it. Okay. I know there's lots of developers and lots of SQL developers who will take a select statement like this. And while it is, you know, legitimate, you can write a select statement like this, right? Like this is a legit select statement where it's all on one line, but it, like, I mean, I can't read that. Can you read that? I mean, don't do that to your business users, right? Like
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. You know, the funny thing, we from the beginning we adapted this kind of the SQL in the data flow. We really need like to pay attention on the formatting. So we copy that kind of format very well then into the advanced editor. I think you notice that in the native query it cannot carry the formatting. Only in the advanced editor it can carry all the formatting stuff. So that is very helpful. So when we want to debug and maintain all this stuff, you want to change the name conversion, everything. It's very easy to go in and adjust.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And make sure you take your users through that. Like, don't try to do it here. Look, right over here, it's really easy, right? And so much of tech is like that, right? This path is super difficult. This path is easy. Teach people the easy path. Great question.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And another one, is there any way to export data from data mart to Pro Workspace?
Unfortunately not. This is a premium feature. I'm kind of sad about that. I'm also at the point where I think everyone should just upgrade to premium, or PPU or premium. Like if you have Pro, you should go to PPU. I mean, if you look at the BI platforms out there, this is not necessarily something. As a developer, you probably hear that, but like the case for management is Power BI needs these premium capabilities, and just because we can enter at this lower price point doesn't mean we should, and we should be paying at this other price point because there's no other BI tool out there that's even close to that PPU price point. Either upgrade to PPU or add in a premium node depending upon the size of your org. It is 100% worth it.
That maybe might be possible in the future if they bring your own SQL data mart.
Yeah. I mean, yes, if you stand up your own SQL server, you can do this all yourself, and you can do it without a premium, 100%. You know, I think a SQL server is $300 a month. So, do the math.
Okay, the next question is, what is the difference between a query and a function in SQL?
Oh, fantastic. So a function can return results, or it can do something in a regular basis. For the basics of working with Power BI and writing and returning data, just be concerned with well, actually, that's a custom function. A function inside of SQL it's something that we've used inside of here. So like sum is a function, as well as where's my little cheat sheet here? Way at the bottom. I wrote this function, which is a date add function. What this does is it basically the date add function is going to add, in this case, D days 14 to the order date. Okay, so that's what this function is doing. So a function in this case is part of my SQL statement. Does that make sense? I hope.
Yeah, I guess I was just caught a bit off guard in a meeting this week, wherein my source was from a SQL database, uh, but the source was a function and it was not a query, so
Was
that
this a
confused me.
function or a stored procedure?
It was a function because when I then checked the in Power BI, when I checked the source, um, over there it mentioned that it's a function and not a query.
Yeah, there is a lot of things that can be done in SQL. That is definitively not a normal access pattern. Some like you may whatever platform you're working on may have a reason for that. I would say that more often would you find a stored procedure that would return your results. In data marts, you only have views, so that's not something that you should worry about. But it is very common for especially if an application is accessing a database, to do it through a stored procedure where they pass in variables, and then the stored procedure would handle the stuff behind the scenes. But in the data world, it is most common to connect to probably first it's views, then it's tables, then it's stored procedures, and then way at the bottom is functions. So you ran into an exception. Oh, there's pest one. I am terribly sorry. I have a hard stop at 1. I gotta fly. Thank you guys all so very much.
Thanks a lot, Chris. It was a great meetup. We learned a lot. Okay. Let me
Like, subscribe, follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, all that good stuff, right? Thanks, everybody.